This is Tin Hawk's Journeyverse Journeys, Part 14. The next morning. Xander collapsed, exhausted, to the ground as the brilliance of the morning light broke over the top of the jungle. He looked around, seeing nothing but carnage for the length of the village. Those few people who had survived the night were huddled together in terror. His armor was covered in the blood of a dozen warriors who had stood beside him when the horde had attacked. His mind was still bathed in the horror of their screams, combined with the evil hisses of the creatures as they attacked. Jana was unconscious next to him, in bad shape from the night of fighting, but still alive. Xander moaned and pulled himself to his feet, dragging her away from the smoking pits of acid that had been the corpse of the alien creatures. That shit can't be good for your lungs. The fighting had been over when the creatures had died or gotten what they came for, the latter in far too many instances. They grabbed people, kicking and screaming from the arms of their loved ones, and vanished into the night with their prizes. And for every one person they grabbed, we face another one of those things tomorrow night. Xander dropped to his knees when he had reached the huddled group of survivors. Perhaps 1 in 4 had survived the night, leaving the village with less than 80 people that still breathed. Xander shut his eyes for the first time in over 20 hours, willing the darkness to overtake him. "Wait, what was that?" Elan suddenly shouted into his mind. Xander practically teleported to his feet, the plasma caster on his shoulder whirring quietly as it tracked the jungle. "What? What did that man say?" "Huh?" Xander spun around, riding the adrenaline rush that Elan's words had initiated. "What man?" "The one in the group. Ask him to repeat what he just said." Xander looked around, finally spotting a small group that was talking rather than sobbing or sleeping. He walked over to them and repeated what Elan whispered to him. The man looked at him curiously, and with a fair bit of awe and fear, before repeating himself. "Chapa Ai," Elan said, the word reverently. "He said they were going to pray for deliverance at the Chapa Ai." "So?" Xander was confused. Being half dead from exhaustion had done little for his mental capacity. "The Chapa Ai is a word from the language older than even I, Alexander. It is used to describe a portal that connects to a pan-galactic network of conduits that connect hundreds of thousands of Earth-type worlds. If there's a Chapa Ai here, we can use it to evacuate the people to safety, and perhaps find a way to return to Earth." "Whoa," Xander was waking up fast. "Why didn't you just say so?" "I just did." Alanthiel sounded somewhat annoyed. It took most of the morning to figure out the details and establish a plan of action. After almost an hour of stumbling over his words and dumbly repeating what Elan told him to say, they managed to ascertain that there was indeed a gateway located on this world. After that, it was a matter of getting everyone to grab what they could and abandon the village. By early afternoon, Xander was supervising a column of single and double file villagers on a 3-mile forced march. They were hanging a lot on the words of a few villagers, in Xander's opinion, but he didn't see any other option. Another night here, and everyone would be dead, or worse. Despite his fatigue, Xander patrolled along the length of the column, scanning the jungle for any sign of attack. They had hit the halfway point when the first indications that they were being followed occurred. Xander could see the heat signatures scattering, and knew instantly that there was trouble in the wind. He moved away from the main group, searching for the creatures he knew were stalking them. They found him. The forward scouts of the column heard the horrid hissing they remembered from the night before, followed by sounds of a struggle and a bestial battle cry. They broke from the group and charged into the area, their weapons held at the ready. As they broke into the clearing, they saw a sight that stopped all of them in their tracks, only long experience keeping their weapons from dropping from nerveless hands. The warrior who had fought by their side the night before was besieged by a half-dozen of the creatures of their nightmares, and around him lay the bodies of a half-dozen more. When the first one struck him, Xander went down hard. He could feel them scrabbling at his armor as they started to drag him away. He drew Elan with a practiced motion, bracing the ancient weapon against the ground before activating it. The sudden expansion of the weapon broke the swarm apart, sending 3 of them flying away from Xander and giving him room to move. Xander was back to his knees when the swarm regrouped and charged him again. He fired the plasma caster by reflex, holding 3 of them at point-blank range and scattering acid around the clearing. He slowly backed into a large tree, keeping his back to the trunk and warding the rest back with careful movements of his staff. Xander cursed himself repeatedly. He knew that he should have never gotten so close without him knowing, but he had been fatigued and nowhere near the top of his game. He shifted the staff to his left hand, crooked it in his arm, and swept it in a hard swing that cracked through the carapace of one of his attackers. His right gauntlet activated, 8-inch blade snapping out and eviscerating the closest alien with a vicious slash. Internally, Xander had slipped into a trance. The outside world had faded into blackness. Inside that darkness was only him and the creatures of his nightmare. All he could hear were their screams, their hisses, and his voice above it all, chanting a mantra that would have shocked him a few short weeks earlier. "Not alive, you bastards. Never alive. I won't let you take me alive." The warriors were torn. Their honor demanded that they help the one who had fought for them the night before, but it was suicide to enter the boundaries of the clearing he fought in. The demon's poisoned blood had created a circle of evil that defied any attempt to enter, and within the circle, they didn't see a fellow warrior. They saw a berserker, a being as demonic in his fierce manner as the creature he fought. "Alexander!" Xander didn't hear the voice. He slashed down with another strike that shattered a black carapace. "Alexander!" Xander whipped his staff around, annihilating another gleaming black talon. "Alexander! What?" he asked as he thrust the staff into another creature's skull. "They are all dead, Alexander. You can stop now." Xander paused, feeling the world return to him, and looked around the clearing with lifeless eyes. The corpses of a dozen of the aliens were scattered around the field, the acid from their bodies filling the entire area with poisonous fumes. Xander rapidly checked himself out and found to his relief that by some miracle he couldn't fathom, he had emerged from the battle unscathed by the alien acid. At the edge of the field, he saw a group of warriors, grouped against the edge of the acid circle, watching him in awe that quickly turned to fear as he stalked towards them, his body language clearly showing his current state of mind. He walked like someone who had lost his fear, his anger, and perhaps his sanity. Rutha watched as the human forced his charges to double time their march. He didn't know what hope the boy possibly had that would cause him to do this. There was no way to outrun the kind Ahmed. Silently, he considered what he had just witnessed. The human had taken on a dozen of the kind Ahmed and emerged victorious. It was an unprecedented feat, but for one with as little training as the boy, it was disturbing. "Is that it?" "That is the Shapa Eye," Alan said with some satisfaction. "How do I activate it?" Xander asked dully. Rutha stared in shock. "A Shapa Eye? By the gods! Had we known there was a gate on this world, we would have never have seeded it with the kind Ahmed colony." He knew what had to be done. The gate of the heavens must be buried until the colony was expunged. The Utja thumbed his recall button on his gauntlet and summoned his ship. "So we can't dial Earth?" "No, the primary gate on Earth was buried." "What about the secondary?" "It would be unwise to bring these people to that gate. It is located in what you call Antarctica." "Oh. That pretty much summed things up. Any suggestions?" "Normally, I would not want to rely on information that is 10,000 years old, but in this case..." Elan gave Xander a series of symbols to dial. "We have no choice but to travel blindly. I do not know the name of this world, or its coordinates. There is no return." "Crap," Xander cursed. "Slow death here, or possibly fast death through the big circle thingy. I love my life." Rutha watched from his ship as the human activated the Chapa Eye and began to shuffle people through it. He shook his head in disgust at the waste of energy. Why save creatures who were totally helpless? His attention was attracted to his ship's sensors when they began to bleed a warning, the kind the med were approaching the shop eye. He targeted the gate, and his talons tightened on the firing stud. The helmet's acoustic sensors hissed with the evil sound that haunted Xander's mind, causing him to snap around to look at the jungle. What he saw caused his blood to run cold. From the jungle came a horde of the glistening black carapaces, all heading straight for the gate in Xander's group. Xander opened fire, his plasma caster blowing holes through the creatures, sometimes 2 at a time as they advanced. But the horde was too large, and it was closing fast. The villagers began to run into the portal, their only hope for salvation, an unknown world, hundreds of light years away. The horde was almost upon them when fire rained from the sky, creating a wall of destructive force between them and the nightmarish creatures. Xander looked up and saw the Utah ship. "Rutha," Xander whispered. Then he turned back to the running people and screamed at them. "Move!" He hoped they understood the intent, even if they didn't understand the word. But he didn't spare them another glance as he activated a LAN and moved to cover their retreat. Between the Utah's shipboard weapons clearing up the majority of the creatures as they made a rush for the gate, and Xander eliminating any stragglers, the field was cleared quickly. The Utah slowly lowered his ship to the ground. Xander watched as the Utah stepped down the gangplank, staring at him from 30 meters away. Xander tensed. He knew that Rutha wouldn't likely shoot him at point-blank range, not without giving him a warning at any rate. His fingers tensed on the laser designator's control when the Utah reached behind his back. Xander started when the Utah tossed an object to him. He caught it reflexively, staring at it dumbly for a moment before he recognized it. A short sword, Japanese, very old from what Xander could tell, and very, very ornate. A prize trophy. Xander looked up at the creature, then lifted his leg and slipped the carbon black tanto from its sheath. He looked at the blade for a long moment, then tossed it to the alien. Rutha caught the blade easily and stared at it for a few seconds. Suddenly, the big Utah growled in wild laughter as he recognized the blade that had nearly led to his death. He saluted Xander with the long black blade. Xander returned the salute with the wakizashi, short sword, then turned and stepped through the Stargate. 1 week later. Xander looked over the surviving villagers, who were watching as he stood in front of the chopper eye. "You could stay a while longer." Xander shook his head. "No, we've scouted the area. There are no threats within days of here. I can't stay here. Not my style. Not anymore, anyway. I'll come back and check from time to time as I can." Xander sighed and tapped out a series of coordinates onto the pedestal, ducking back involuntarily as the gate exploded outwards in activation. "So where are you going anyways?" "These coordinates are to a world that may have the ability to get us home." "How the hell can you remember all this stuff anyway?" Xander asked curiously as he walked up the steps. "What else do I have to do? Memories are all I have left." Xander grimaced. And on that happy note, he stepped through the gate. This has been Tin Hawk's Journeyverse Journeys, Part 14. Links down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe.